Hello everyone, my name is Kitetsu and welcome back to my channel. So it is the launch weekend for the Idoneth Deepkin. Yesterday saw the release of the Eidolon, Lotan, the Gloomtide Shipwreck, and obviously we got the Battletome and the dice as well. And we also got two new pre-orders go live, which are the super cool looking Namarti Reavers and the dual kit Achillean King and Volturnos, the High King of the Deep. Yesterday I picked up a copy of the Battletome and I have been reading my way through it slowly. Unfortunately, I'm not quite famous enough yet for Games Workshop to send me stuff early, so I had to pick it up at the same time as everyone else did. Basically, because I've only had like yesterday and today to read through it, what I thought I would do, instead of like a proper review, I thought I would give my initial impressions, and the best way to do so I thought would be to pick the 10 things so far that have immediately jumped out in the book to me. Like the things I absolutely love so far about the Idoneth Deepkin from the Battletome that is making me want to collect this faction. I've actually now fully converted to loving the Deepkin, and I've got some of the figures on order and I absolutely cannot wait now. But part of that I think was waiting for the Battletome and seeing if it was going to deliver, and to me so far it definitely has. You know, I've mentioned this before, but the faction has grown on me enormously over the course of its release. I was a little bit disappointed at first when they were revealed because I was kind of expecting something totally different, but now I just love them. And I think mainly it's the lore that has converted me and just made these figures come to life. I guess if I compare this release to the Daughters of Cain one, that one was far more predictable and I basically got everything that I wanted from the release and was expecting, whereas everything about this faction is just completely new and original. As it stands at the moment, I'm more excited about the Deepkin than I was the Daughters of Cain, and not just because they're new and exciting, but it's more to do with the variety of the army and just how good I think the lore is. And I love the way that it's got these distinct branches and organisation around the Namarti, the Isharann and the Achilleans. It just all seems to tie together so well, and ultimately the Daughters of Cain release was really great and the Morathi model is absolutely stunning. But at the same time, I wish they had have kind of released more models for it, because really we got the Morathi kit and two dual build kits, and even the different assemblies in those kits were relatively similar to one another. Whereas this army is all about variety. You know, you go from a giant turtle to blind elves. I don't know if I've mentioned this before in any of my videos, but to me, I absolutely love archers and ranged units. So when they first revealed the Reavers, I was literally over the moon. Like, they're absolutely perfect as a kit. I actually wish the Daughters of Cain had have had some bog standard archers too, rather than just the Melusai. But anyway, let's get into the list of 10 things that are immediately leaping out at me as things I love about this army. And they're not in any particular order either. One thing I will say is actually on reflection, this is more of a top 8 things I love about them, because the last 2 things are things I've talked about already, and I've already got videos on them, so they deserve a mention, but they don't need any great discussion. So number 1, there are tons of battle line options. The Namarti Thralls are the basic battle line option as you would expect, but there are lots of battle line if options that make tons of sense. For example, the Reavers that I love so much can be battle line if you take an Isharann hero as your general. This means that if you like having a kind of army themed around the idea of scouts and massed infantry, and you just generally love the Namarti like I do, you can mix things up really well with having 2 types of battle line option to you right from the get-go. It does mean you have to take a weak general for your army, but I like to think of it in terms of having your general play more of a supporting role instead of being a massive powerhouse in combat. Additionally, both types of Fangmora Eel Riders can be battle line if your general is an Achillean hero, so if you want to field an Idoneth Deepkin allegiance army, you can really mix things up, whether you choose the massed infantry route or the small elite force. I guess what I appreciate the most here is that it gives people more options, because some people might absolutely love the Fangmora riders or the Namarti, and others may hate them. I've mentioned in the past that one of the things about Age of Sigmar that's a bit of a downfall for it is that a lot of the armies are not very varied, and therefore it only means you don't have to like 1 or 2 units in an army to completely put you off collecting it, no matter how cool the other things are. Say you've only got one battle line option and you absolutely hate those models, but you love everything else. you are forced to take the battle line options if you want to go for that particular allegiance. But in this case, like say you don't like the Eel Riders, you don't have to include them at all. And the same goes for the Namarti, so you know, lots of options is always a good thing. Number 2, the Idoneth Enclaves are all really cool. I think the different temples and cults for the Daughters of Cain were not that gripping or exciting to me. The whole premise of what made the lore of the Daughters of Cain exciting to me revolved around how amazing Morathi is as a character. Everything else felt a little bit like it was on the sideline, and I know that's just my opinion, but personally I just think the Deepkin have a much more well-rounded and interesting backstory. Their enclaves are far more varied, and I think they're a lot closer to the kind of skyports we had with the Caradron Overlords in their variety. One of the huge appeals to me for the Overlords was to try and work out which skyport I liked the most, so that I could really personalise my collection and have more attachment to the army, to get behind their different motives and rivalries. And I know it's not a new thing to Warhammer in general, but it's cool that they've put so much thought into their backstories. And obviously each enclave has been given its own special rules, which is really great too. The main group of the Deepkin, for example, the Iron Rack, they get to add 1 to their casting rolls for all of their wizards, because they are particularly strong in magic, and allied units also have the Tides of Death battle trait, which I'll talk more about later. So the Iron Rack are the enclave that live in Priam, which is the capital underwater city of the Deepkin. They are the closest in ancestry to the first Deepkin that were made by Teclis, and it was the Iron Rack who saved the Deepkin from extinction, because they discovered the soul-binding rituals that created the Namarti. That's just one snippet of backstory for one of the enclaves, but the other enclaves all have similarly rich backstories. From the chilling Morfan, who live in the realm of death and are gifted at healing, to the Briomdar, who are personal favourites of mine. The Briomdar live in underwater forests in Ghyran, and they're well known for the exceptional abilities of their soul scryers. They can also travel across difficult terrain with ease, so on the tabletop this means that all of the units can act as if they can fly when it comes to terrain, and their soul scryers can teleport 3 units on the board instead of the usual 2, so they can set up these really cool ambushes with Reavers and other Namarti units, which is really excellent. Number 3 has to go to the number of different leaders that the army has. There are literally 8. And sure, 2 of them are alternate forms of the Eidolon, but nevertheless there is so much variety here. The Isharann in particular are personal favourites of mine. We have the Tidecasters that are wizards that can cast spells from the lore of the deeps, the Soul Renders that are great at healing fallen Namarti, the Soul Scryers who can teleport 2 units onto a table edge, and they also add 3 to charge rolls for any Deepkin units within 12 inches of a chosen enemy target, and then we have the Soul Warden Lotan, who is a named character that is actually well worth taking. He isn't particularly powerful in combat, but he boosts the bravery of nearby Deepkin units, and he lets Namarti reroll hit rolls of 1 within 12 inches. So that's very cool. A weakness of the Deepkin is definitely their bravery, but fortunately the army has plenty of ways to boost that back up. You know, another way of doing that is the command trait that adds 2 to the bravery of all Deepkin units within 12 inches of the general. If you pick a cool supporting general who is up close with the front line and doesn't seem to be much of a target to your opponent, then the Namarti will go from a lacking bravery of 6 to a superb bravery of 9, assuming you are near Lotan as well, that is. To make things even better, your enemy won't be able to target that general thanks to their Forgotten Nightmares battle trait, and more on that in a bit. So, number 4, there is a spell from the Lore of the Deep that I particularly love. Generally the spells at first glance seem decent, not quite as exciting as the Deepwood spell lore that the Sylvaneth have, but still perfectly serviceable. You can pick up heroes and move them around the board, for example, and there is a spell that has a chance to auto kill an enemy model with up to 5 wounds. The one I particularly like, however, is called Abyssal Darkness, and this one lets you treat all Deepkin units within 9 inches as if they are in cover, which gives them a decent +1 to their save. I can immediately tell you now that I'm going to theme my Deepkin army around giving them as many buffs as I can, and by the time you've stacked up a few of these, it's going to be quite impressive. It means you can have Thralls and Reavers going from a 5-up save to being on par with heavily armoured infantry like Stormcast Eternals, minus their shields at least. I haven't gone through all of the artifacts yet, but I'm sure there's some pretty cool stuff in there to buff things as well. Number 5, the Isharann can carry out rituals. This was actually a pretty random mechanic, but I did really like it. There's only 3 and they're very specific. One, for example, heals your Eidolon, which is great if you're actually fielding one, and another one prevents your enemy units from flying. But the one I actually really like is the Ritual of Erosion, and this one is just going to be generally useful nearly all the time, because it means that all enemy units get no benefit from being in cover. That's super cool, and rituals are pretty simple to cast, or perform should I say. You roll 2d6 and add modifiers to it to try and get a total of 10. If you hit that magic number 10, you've successfully carried out the ritual. If you performed the ritual close to a Gloomtide shipwreck, for example, you add 1 to the roll. You can also add an extra 1 if it's a priest that's carrying it out, and yeah, there's just loads of ways to boost that roll to the point where if you really wanted to have enough heroes in your army, you could probably make sure it goes off automatically. Number 6, Forgotten Nightmares. Okay, so missile weapons can only be used to target an Idoneth Deepkin unit with this battle trait if it's the closest visible enemy unit. I love this on so many levels. I once made a video about the top 5 changes I wanted to come to Age of Sigmar, and I can only remember one of them, and that was to bring across the 40k shooting rule. The one where you can only target an enemy hero if it's the closest unit to those firing. The special rule that's just been added here for the Idoneth has completely changed my mind, because they've made it so cool having that ability locked to a specific faction. And not only that, but it totally one-ups the 40k rule because it applies to all Idoneth units. As I mentioned earlier, there is limitless potential to have fun with this ability, from protecting your archers to feeling confident fielding a general that's a little bit weaker and moving him right up near the front line to buff your troops. I absolutely love it. It means you can bring those Reavers into close range as well, where they triple the amount of shots they make, and yet they can be completely protected from return fire. Stick a wall of Thrall in front of them and they can't be charged either, so there are tons of tactical possibilities here. Speaking of Thrall, I love their War Scrolls so much. These guys are my number 7. They can shred their way through weaker enemies with ease. If they attack enemy units with a single wound, they do 3 attacks, which is absolutely insane. And they have rend. They hit and wound on the golden 3+. They're fast, they move 6 inches, they're so easily buffed as well. Stick a few heroes and your general near them, they're going to be bravery 9, re-rolling 1s, and you've got 10 in a unit, which all have a 4+ save. Now, all this awesomeness comes at a cost, however, because they're 140 points per unit. I guess the only real slight consideration with them is that they're going to be far more effective against certain units than others, and they're still a little bit weak to damage, but because you have 10 in a unit, it's not too bad. Right, so the final proper one that I'm going to discuss is my number 8. So basically, allies can take the Idoneth Deepkin allegiance abilities. This is a really cool shake-up to the ally formula. I've said so many times now that I'm still not happy with the way the ally system works, because most of the time you are just far better off taking advantage of the keywords and the allegiance abilities of a specific faction. Say you're taking a pure Sylvaneth army, for example, and you add 400 points of allies in, they no longer benefit from the Sylvaneth keyword, so you're probably better off spending those 400 points just on more Sylvaneth. But the mix-up they've done here has at least gone a little way to rectify this. The Iron Rack, which I mentioned earlier, can give the Tides of Death battle trait to allied units, thanks to the Emissary of the Deep Places command trait. But we also have a cool War Scroll battalion called Alliance of Wood and Sea, and it lets you take more than 400 points of allies of Sylvaneth. It allows you to ally up a Branch Witch, 2 units of Dryads, a Tree Lord Ancient, and these Sylvaneth get the Tides of Death battle trait too. So thematically, it's a really cool idea. I'm actually tempted to build this army because I love Sylvaneth, I like the Deepkin that live in the underwater forests of Ghyran, so it just sounds like a perfect thematic match. Right, so this video is probably getting quite long by now, so I'm going to kind of wrap things up, and as I said at the beginning, I'm kind of going to cheat because the last 2 things are things I've already talked about, but I guess I want to mention at number 9 that the Tides of Death mechanic is really unique, innovative and fun. I've already pretty much gone through the whole thing, and by now I'm sure all of you know what it is. But at number 10, the lore. I absolutely love it so much, and the Battletome is absolutely crammed full of it. Obviously, with it only coming out yesterday and me having to make videos and work on my course, I haven't read all of it yet, but if you haven't seen my 2-part mini lore series on the Idoneth, which I wrote before the Battletome came out, go and watch those. But from what I've read in the book so far, it's all really cool, and I can't wait to read more. But right, that is enough for one video. I hope you are all well. Thanks as always for your support. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and like the video. And I will see you guys really soon.